Hey team, Coach Roundtree here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time on my channel, I post interview tips and career advice to help you elevate your game. All right, this is the second installment of a series I'm calling the Coach's Corner. If you think about any sporting event, a coach calls a timeout, he or she rallies a team, and they draw up a play to get a bucket. This is what this series is all about. If you haven't watched the first series, I'll link it in the description below. But today's session is a very important question. It's all about what's your salary expectations. If you're like me, when I first started my career, I avoided talking about money at all costs. I didn't understand the process. So I really help you today. So this is not a scripted video. I just have 5 quick tips that you can use today. If you have an interview later today or this morning, I want to make sure you have the information. So before I jump in, I want to take a step back and say why you should even consider this advice. It's because I've tried it and I've used it myself. So over the last 14 years, I've reinvented myself 4 times. Started my career as a science teacher and basketball coach back in the day. From there, I became an entrepreneur, launched my own clothing company. After getting my MBA, I then became a retail operations specialist. And then lastly, I've transitioned over into the tech industry. Now I'm a product leader at a Fortune 50 company. I say all that to say is I've interviewed with so many different companies over the last 14 years. Through trial and error, I've developed these skills, and this channel is all about sharing what I know, what has worked for me, that has allowed me to negotiate multiple 6-figure offers from big companies across the country and the world. And I wanted to help you. You have goals for your career, and this is what my channel is all about, sharing knowledge, giving you free game, and I want to hear how it helps change your career. All right, 5 tips. All right, first one, when you're asked what's your salary expectation, there's really only 3 ways you can answer that. The first way or strategy you can use is basically giving a range. Let's say you do your research and you find that a marketing manager in New York makes on average between $50,000 and $100,000. So you want to have that research done before you're asked the question. So when the hiring manager recruiter says, hey, Marcus, what's your expectation for this role in terms of salary? You can confidently say, I'm thinking about a range in between $50,000 to $100,000 for this role. Now, another approach is to make sure that you have the low end and the high end. You want to make sure that you look at your current compensation and you want to make sure that you're seeing at least a $10,000 bump in your base salary. So in that example, instead of saying $50,000 to $100,000, I would actually probably say between $75,000 and $100,000 for that role. So that's tip number 1. Give a range when you're asked that question. Second tip, if you don't want to give a range, you can give a number, a well-researched number of this is what the market is telling me. Based on my skills and experience, I am worth $75,000. Now, if you use that number instead of a range in the marketing manager example, you still have that $25,000 range where you could potentially even get more than what you asked for. And that's really what we want. Now, I want to make sure I'm clear. The number you give should not be a guess. It should be something you've researched. You've been on Glassdoor.com, you've been on Indeed.com, LinkedIn. And the previous video I've developed called, the title was How do you search for a job online? I go very detailed. It's a pretty long video. Skip over to the Glassdoor section. It's the last example. And that's where you'll see how I show you how to find these salaries. So you can get the salary information now more than ever so that you can make sure you say 75K with confidence. The third thing you can do when you're asked, what's your salary expectation, is you can flip the script. Instead of answering the question, you can bounce it back to the hiring manager and say, hey, well, what is the range for this role? Share a quick story. Several years ago, I wanted to advance my career, become a loyalty marketing manager or just a marketing manager overall. So I was interviewing with a company. We started negotiating and we started the conversation, and the interviewer asked me, hey, Marcus, what are your salary expectations? In my head, I only wanted $105,000. That was the number I had in my head. But instead of saying that number, I said, well, what is the range for the role? And I shut my mouth. That's one of the key tips about negotiating. Whoever speaks first loses. So I said, what is the range for the role? And because I had rapport, it was a good conversation. The hiring manager, well, actually the recruiter in this point, she said, well, the range is actually for this role is $150,000 to $185,000. I was like, yeah, that's in my range. But because this role was high visibility, is a very important project for the company, it commanded a higher base salary. So some recruiters will say, well, you have to give me a number. So you want to test this out. But if you built rapport and you're having a good conversation with the recruiter, flipping the script and saying, hey, well, what is the range for the role? You will be surprised, shocked at the range that some of these jobs have. So that was the third example. And I had two more actually. The other two tips is you want to get comfortable saying your number. For me, earlier in my career, I put a cap on my earnings. I could not say in an interview when someone asked Marcus, what are your salary expectations? I couldn't say 100,000. I don't know if it was subconsciously, I just didn't think I was worth $100,000. So when I was interviewing with several companies, I was just applying every day. And I was going on an interview for a startup actually that was growing very fast. And I was in the room and one of the people on the interview panel said, hey, what are your salary expectations? And I said, $100,000 is what I'm expecting. Does that meet your expectations? Is that what is possible for this role? And she said, yes. Now, mind you, immediately after that, I didn't move forward in the interview process. Some things came up and they didn't fill that role. But I said it. It was out there in the universe that, okay, I'm worth $100,000. And a few weeks later, I got an offer for $105,000. But so I said all to say is practice in the mirror, practice with mock interviews with friends, family, coworkers, and then go on interviews for jobs that you probably will not accept, just to throw out numbers to build your confidence. And that's something that I would always encourage you. Always take the interview. My mentor always tells me, Marcus, you don't have a decision to make until you have an offer in your hand. So you want to take as many interviews as you can to get confident answering the question, what are your salary expectations, with a research and documented answer based on what the market is telling you. Last thing I have for your team is with any opportunity you're pursuing, you want to at least see a $10,000 increase in your base salary. So any sort of range if you're currently making $50,000 and you do your research and you see that a marketing manager in your location makes between $50,000 and $75,000, you want to say, for when you're asked a question, what are your salary expectations? You want to say $60,000 to $75,000. So always add a $10,000 buffer in front of your current salary. That way you can feel it. The $10,000 is something that you would feel after taxes. Beyond that, a $5,000 increase, a $3,000 increase, you taxes will eat that up. But $10,000, team, is what you want to at least see as a minimum for your next opportunity. So, all right. Let's back up. Just to recap, every interview, whether it's a phone screen or Insight, someone's going to ask you about money. If you're like me, you were nervous or you're currently nervous about talking about money because we don't know what we're worth. No one tells you how to research the market value. It's not something that I learned in school. It was from trial and error. So first thing, when you're asked, what's your salary expectation? You can give a range. This is a range based on Glassdoor, Indeed, or LinkedIn. You've done your homework and you have your range. Within that range, if you're making $50,000 currently, start the range above that. So maybe start at $60,000 to $100,000. Second thing you want to do, if you don't feel comfortable with giving a range, give a number, a well-researched number where you've done your homework, you know exactly what the market value is, so you can confidently say, when they ask you, what are your expectations for this salary expectations for this job? I want $75,000. Last thing, if you want to, some people, if you watch other videos, they'll say, don't give a number, don't give a number. I don't agree with that approach. However, you want to see what works best for you. So try multiple strategies across different interviews. So the third thing you can do is flip the script. Put the question in their court. Instead of giving a range or a number, say, well, what is the range for this role? Ask the recruiter that and shut your mouth. Don't say anything, just listen and wait for them to tell you. Some will push back. If they do push back, then you want to make sure you have your range available as well as your number. Last two things, get comfortable saying your number. Practice over and over again so that you can overcome anything in your head that says, well, I don't know if I'm worth 50,000 or 75 or 100,000. Well, if you do your research and you see other people are making that and you have the same skills, experience, and background, yes, you are worth that. Go to Glassdoor, go to Indeed and LinkedIn to get that information. And then the last thing, I've said it a few times, but make sure you go after at least a $10,000 increase. If you find the range for the role is $50,000 to $100,000 and you're currently making 50 as a marketing manager, you want to tell the recruiter, I expect at least $60,000 for this role, or I expect between $60,000 and $100,000. So team, thank you for joining this Coach's Corner about what are your salary expectations. I hope this was helpful. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe below. I'm Coach Roundtree. On my channel, I post interview tips and career advice to help you elevate your game. I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think about it, or comment on other questions you think I should tackle in the Coach's Corner. You can do this.